What if the key to your financial freedom wasn't in your 9 to 5, but in your ability to own property? Whether it's a cozy Airbnb or a long term rental, real estate can unlock passive income, stability, and legacy wealth. Today on Wholeness Wednesdays, we're talking about real estate for real freedom, how to get started and thrive.
Good morning, or good afternoon, or maybe it's evening. It doesn't really matter what time it is, and it doesn't even matter where you are. We want to welcome you to Wholeness Wednesdays. So grab a cup of coffee or tea and join our host, Beatrice Hutchison, as we explore and experience our journey to complete wholeness.
Hello, 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 and welcome back to another episode of Completely Whole, Wholeness Wednesdays. I am your host, Beatrice Hutchison, and we are here today again on the channel where we talk about everything. We talk about physical wholeness, we talk about mental, emotional, spiritual, and financial wholeness. And so, in the month of July, and we started it last week, but we are talking about financial independence as we celebrated Independence Day a few days ago, and I hope you had a blessed one. But we are talking about financial independence in the month of July. And so we're going to talk about or continue the discussion on creative ways to create financial independence. And so we are super excited to have you with us today. And as you see, we're back in the studio today out of my office, but here in the studio to continue our discussion in reference to financial wholeness. And so today is a very special topic. And so there's something I bet you don't know about me. I am a real estate salesperson. And so I don't often talk about that here on this channel, but I am licensed in New York State to sell property, right? And to assist others. So I am super excited. Something that I am super passionate about. I absolutely love real property. And so today we're going to be talking about or coming from the topic of real estate for real freedom, building wealth with long-term and short-term rentals. So that is what we're going to be talking about today. And so I'm super excited again to talk about this because it's the way. Financial independence can certainly come through real estate. Wonderful. Let's dive in. The first thing I'd like to talk to you today about is why real estate. Why is real estate a powerful wealth tool? And you've heard so many talk about it. Real estate is one of the most reliable vehicles to build long term passive income. And so, according to Forbes, 90% of millionaires made their wealth through real estate. And with inflation rising, owning property becomes a hedge. Your asset appreciates while you build equity. Real estate offers many, many things, but among the many things, it offers tax advantages, monthly cash flow, and the opportunity to leverage other people's money, that OPM, right? That's a good thing. Such as banks and partners, hard money lenders. There are so many out there. But you get to leverage other people's money. And so we're going to talk about real estate today, some options that are out there. And I want to just give us a scripture reference today coming from Proverbs 13:22. A good person leaves an inheritance for their children's children. And so we're talking about financial independence, but financial independence that leads to generational wealth, right? That doesn't just stop with you. It may start with you, but it doesn't have to stop with you. And so we're talking about generational wealth and the impact that real estate can have on your generations, right? And so generation is definite, I'm sorry, real estate is definitely the vehicle that could take you there. And so next, let's talk about long-term rentals, right? So we're going to do a little contrast. We're going to talk about long-term rentals as opposed to short-term rentals, what those are. So first, let's talk about long-term rentals. And so long-term rentals, they give steady cash flow, right? They give a steady cash flow and simplicity, right? It's not as complicated. So let's talk a bit about long-term rentals. And so long term rentals are residential properties that are rented for 12 months or more, right? So those are those yearly leases that you may see you enter into a lease for a year. So anything 12 months or more is considered a long-term rental, right? And so we are talking about residential properties. And so what are some benefits of long-term rentals? So you have the predictable income, right? So as long as the you do have it housed, right? As long as it is rented, it and that it's not vacant, you have that predictable income that's coming in every month, unless there is some tragedy that comes up. But pretty much, you have that predictable income. And then it's also a little bit easier to manage with a property manager, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But that is an option, right? So it's a little bit easier, right? There aren't so many moving pieces, and so it's a little bit more easier to manage. Then also another benefit is strong tenant relationships, because you have an opportunity to build that, because the tenant is in your property for longer periods of time, right? So you have that opportunity to build tenant relationships. And so as a result of building those relationships, you see lower turnover. And so a beginner's tip here is you can start by house hacking. That is something that I did. I had my primary residence and I rented out rooms, right? And so that was how I first had gotten into it. But you can also do something like that in your primary residence. You can rent out rooms, spaces in your house, your basement. You have to make sure that it aligns with zoning and all of that, that it is legitimate. But you can do something like that in your home. Also, you can buy a duplex, right? And you can live in one side or on one floor, and then you can rent out the other. And so that's called house hacking, because you rent it out, and the person or the family that's renting the other side are the ones that actually end up paying your mortgage for the house, right? So it's a house hack. And so you can do that. There's special funding out there that would allow you to be able to buy into a situation like this. And then, you have to live, especially if you do like an FHA loan or mortgage, you have to live there for a year, right? And then you can move out, and there are other options that become available to you. And so, but that is something that you can do. So you can start out with house hacking, or even before then, you can invest. If you're serious about investing, you can start out with a REIT. That's a real estate investment trust, where you can buy into it, right? So almost similar to a stock, you would buy in, or you would purchase shares in the investment trust. And so that is a way. In the investment trust, they have different, I don't want to say assortments, but different types of those. So groupings of real estate, right? And so it can be mini malls, strip malls, those sorts of things, commercial properties, those sorts of things, building areas, those can be considered a REIT, right? So there's so many different ones out there, and you can find one of those, but that's the easy way, right? Entry level. But then if you want to actually go into the actual real property, a way to start would be to do the house hacking method that I mentioned. And so let's talk about some tools to explore. If we're looking for long-term rentals, right? We can begin to look at, there are tools there that Zillow you can look at. You can look at Redfin to do your research on the markets, right? Because you want to make sure that you buy in a market that is lucrative, right? You want it to be a decent neighborhood, right? Because you don't want to have to rent in a neighborhood that is not safe for whoever you're trying to rent to, right? You want it to be a safe area as much as possible. And you also want it to be a decent area, but it doesn't have to be high end, especially not when you're starting out. So you want to research your markets, see where you're able to afford to get in, right? That you're able to go in with a good price and it's a good property, right? So those are things you want to start to begin to research, and Zillow and Redfin could be very helpful in doing so. Also, you want to get around others that are talking about real estate, right? So you want to participate in some top real estate forums. And so one that comes to mind is Bigger Pockets. And so that is a community of those that participate or engage in real estate, right? And so all different facets of it. So it's a good place to also network so that you can link up to others that are involved in real estate, right? You can really partner with others and build your team, right? Depending on whatever it is that you want to do. But it is a wonderful place to learn. So they do have a YouTube channel as well where you can go there and you can learn about real estate and how to invest in real estate, right? And so there's so many options that are available there. And then also property management platforms. They have a few. I'll mention two to you. Buildium is one. Also, Rent Ready is another one that you could look into to just get an understanding about how property management works and what those platforms have available to you that could assist you. And so I mentioned that when I started out with the house hacking that I lived on the premises, so I was the landlord, right? But there's so many options now. You don't have to manage your own property. Your tenants don't ever have to see you as landlord, right? You can have a property management company that will manage that part of it for you, right? And they even do clearances as far as clearing tenants to be able to move in with the credit checks and all of those sorts of things, whatever it is that you want to set up to make sure that you are renting to reputable people. You can do that through your property management. And then they also help you to manage the property, right? So you always hear these horror stories about you have to get up in the middle of the night and go tend to, a clogged toilet or some heating issue, right? So the property management company removes all of that. So you really do not have to be hands on with it in the respect of being on the property and building and working with the tenants because the property management company will do that. All right, now let's talk about. So that is the long term. In a nutshell, that's the long term rental aspect of investing in real estate. So now let's talk more about short term rentals, right? So short term rentals, Airbnb, they give fast cash and flexibility. And so short term rentals, the definition of that is that it is something that is not up to 12, it is not 12 months or more, right? So anything less than could be a short-term rental, and there's so many different reasons for short-term rentals. It could be Airbnb, and that's one that's very common and very popular nowadays, and that people usually go into that for if they're going away on vacation, right? It's a little bit less expensive to do an Airbnb than to be in a hotel, especially if you're traveling with a large group, right? Or if you have a large family. So an Airbnb is something that could really, really be an asset or be beneficial to you in that respect. So that's Airbnb, right? And so it could be however long someone would vacation is how long you could have. You can offer it in the increments that you would like. But then another short-term rental could be having leases with companies. I think about like visiting nurses, or you can have in areas where there are hospitals, and especially those teaching hospitals where you have people that come in to learn. If they need to be there for any amount of time, maybe not the full year, right? But then they maybe need to be there on a 6-month lease, a 3-month lease, while they are there engaging in their curriculum or their residential, like whatever it is, their residence, whatever it is that they're doing. You can partner with those types of programs for shorter times, right? So those are short-term rentals, not above the 12 months. And so, but something that we do find out with short term rentals is that they can generate 2 to 3 times more income than your long term leases. And so, as I mentioned, it can be great for vacation areas and your college towns, right? In an area where you have a lot of colleges, you can be an off campus apartment, right, for students. And so that is something that you can also do. I mentioned near the hospitals, also near like businesses, any business hubs, those sorts of places. You can also any types of attractions, right? You could also have those short-term rentals. And especially with Airbnb, you do exceptionally well around tourist areas, right? Around areas that have attractions. It definitely attracts people to those areas because people want to go on vacation and visit. And so it's a good place to have your short-term rental. And so you do not need to own a mansion. You can have a small studio, it could be a tiny home, it could be a single room. Any of those can thrive on Airbnb, right? It depends on what people are looking for. And if it is nicely done and it's well decorated, it's in a good community, is well taken care of, then you can really, really thrive and do well on Airbnb. And so a stat is, according to Air DNA, the average U.S. Airbnb host earns $13,800 a year per listing. And that's often just from the weekend. So imagine if you're in a place that really attracts, if you're near any tourist area or an attraction, you can, and in a place that maybe is a little warmer, right? You can definitely be year round. And so not just on the weekends, but you could also have the opportunity to be able to provide that short term leasing option or a rental option, as you are um, throughout the week as well, right? So that you are able to, that's why you're able to 2x and 3x what you're able to earn in the 1 month, right? So there are so many more options because you have more people coming in and out. So you're able to make more income in that way. So, some things to consider when you're thinking about short term rentals, right? So, you want to think about location, 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 as they say, right? Because it is so important. You also want to think about the local regulations, right? And the zoning laws. You want to make sure that it permits whatever it is that you're trying to do. So, if you want to use it for an Airbnb, then you want to make sure that the zoning laws and the local regulations allow you to do such. And so there's also an option if you do not want to purchase a home, right, to be able to put up on Airbnb. Another option is that you can go in as your legal entity, your business, right, and you're able to go in and actually rent from a landlord, right? And so think about a property that has been on the market for, say, more than 60 days, right? So now that landlord is still having to absorb the cost for that property, right? So whether it is a mortgage or whatever other expenses, but the landlord has to now absorb those if the place is vacant, right? So that gives you an advantage. So you're able to go in and take that property off the market, right? It helps you. It gives you that edge, right? It gives you that advantage where you can come into agreement with that landlord to Airbnb that property, right? So then it doesn't have to be any cash up front or any out of pocket purchase, right? But it could be something that you take on as a rental as well. So that's also an option that you can do. But you want to make sure that whatever it is that you decide to do, that it is that you've looked at the zoning laws and the local regulations and making sure that everything is legitimate and making sure that everything is according to the law. Also, you want to think about your finishing costs, right? You want to think about what it will take to furnish the place to get it up to the standard that you would like. So you want to take into consideration that. You also want to think about the seasonal fluctuations that you may encounter, right? Because depending on your location, right? You may have more or less during the winter months, right? You may, depending on your location, but you have to factor that in that you may not have, 5 days a week, have your property rented if you're not in one of those areas that allow you to do so. So you just wanted to take into consideration those things. So you want to look at whatever it is, the rent that you are going to pay or the mortgage that you're going to pay. You want to make sure that you're able to afford it based off of what you will make from the property, but taking these things into consideration, right? You also want to think about, you have to have someone that will come in and clean the property, right? So you want to make sure that you're able to restock the property after someone is gone, especially in these short-term rentals, any damages. So you want to make sure that you have enough. You can build that into what you charge when someone is coming for a stay. You can build that in, but you want to make sure you take all of these things into account. And it does differ based on season. So you want to keep that in mind. And so a pro tip here is that you can automate using tools like Smart BNB, Price Labs, and digital keypads, right? Because those allow you contactless entry, right? So that's with the keypad where someone is able to gain entrance to the property. So you don't have to physically be there to let them in, right? Or to lock up after, or those sorts of things, right? So that is something that makes it a lot easier. Now let's talk about getting started. So, what are the steps to begin investing? And so, as I mentioned, depending on where you want to come in at, right? So, if you want to invest in the REITs first, right? Then you want to look do your research and find out the REITs that you would like to buy into, right? Depending on the types of properties that you're interested in, find one that you're interested in and that you can afford, right? And buy into them, and they're not expensive at all. And so you can buy into those if you want to come in at that level. You can also find properties. Wholesaling is a whole other thing that you could do with real estate. And we're not talking about that today. We're talking about the long term and the short term. But also, if you have to also consider whether or not you want to actually rent a property, as I mentioned, right, from a landlord, or if you want to purchase the property, right? You could also you could do a fix and flip, right? You can do so many different things with real estate. It's wonderful. But if you are planning on whatever it is that you're planning on doing, you want to make sure that you check your finances, right? You want to make sure that you know where you stand with your finances, because you will need finances. There may come a time, and most likely it will, where you will have to come out of pocket for something, right? And so you want to make sure that you have saved for it. You want to make sure you're in a good position to be able to chip in, or to be able to handle whatever may arise. But if you're thinking about purchasing, right, you want to make sure you know what's going on with your finances. You want to make sure that you know your credit score, you have your credit reports, and you should be monitoring that on a consistent basis anyway, to make sure everything is accurate and what it needs to be. But you need to know what your credit score is. And if your credit score is not where it needs to be, right? Because banks look for it to be at a certain level. And then also, the higher your credit score, the lower the APR, right? And so all of those things matter. So you want to think about it's not something you just want to jump and do tomorrow, right? The reach you can. But if you're looking to purchase, right, then that's something that you need to prepare for. So if your credit score is not what it needs to be, and you've not been preparing for it, then you want to work on that, right? So you want to think about, paying off whatever outstanding loans you have, because they do look at your utilization. So those are things you want to think about when trying to rebuild your credit or getting your credit score a bit higher, right? So those are things you want to do so that you can improve your credit score to put you in a better position. But it's important that you know your credit score. FHA loans allow for low down payments if you're a first time home buyer, right? So they have lots of first time home buyer programs, and the FHA, just that the property has to be FHA eligible, right? And so they have different things that the home has to have in order for it to be eligible for this program. But if the property is, then it will allow you as a first time home buyer to put down a very low down payment. And so also, so they're thinking about your finances. Also, you want to think about, choose your strategy, right? And so, as I mentioned, either make up your mind as to whether or not you want to buy and hold, you want to fix and flip, you want to do a short term. And so the buy and hold is your long term, but you may want to do short term rental, right? And so, or you may want to buy and hold for a time, right? You may want to hold on to it for some months, for 12 months, and then you may want to refinance it, and then you may want to do the BRRRR strategy and take out from that, get a cash out from that, put down another property. So there's so many options to help you scale this, but you want to make sure that you get all the education and you learn all that you can concerning this, and that you choose what your strategy is going to be. Very, very important. And then you want to pick your market, right? It does not have to be close to home. It can be if you want to be hands on and you need to be able to run back and forth, but it doesn't have to be. So you want to pick your market. You want to look for a place that maybe has as a high rent area, but also as a low cost area. Of course, we want it to be decent. We want it to. We don't want to focus on glamour per se, right? But there is an equation, right? There is a formula that you want to look at to see to make sure that it will give you cash flow. So you don't want to be breaking even and just with the rent, and then you have all these other expenses. You want it to be able to clear all the expenses and then still have cash flow. Cash flow is what's left over after all of the expenses are met. And so you want to make sure that the property is cash flowing for you. And so you want to look at cash flow. It should outweigh the glamour. But there are ways to add glamour, and have a place that is very, very beautiful, right? For a fraction of the cost. So you don't just because it's glamorous doesn't mean that it has to be very, very expensive. There are ways to work around it, right? But the point here is that you want to make sure that it is a property that is cash flowing, right? So you don't want to go in and do marble floors and marble, everything and all these expensive finishings. And so you want to do what is affordable, what's decent, what's beautiful, right? But you want to do something that is feasible, but you want to make sure that it is cash flowing for you. And then also you can start small and then scale smart. So depending on what you want to do, maybe you just want the one property. Maybe you just want to house hack your own house and be able to live for free, right? And have your tenant to be able to pay your mortgage or your rent. It's definitely a possibility. So that's something that you may want to do. But if you are talking about really reaching financial independence, it is going to require that you scale, right? So you don't have to have multiple homes, but it brings you much closer to whatever it is, the financial independence that you're after. So the more homes you have, the more doors you have, the closer you become to financial independence. And there's also a formula for that as well, where you look at what your monthly expenses are, and as opposed to what your cash flow would be from a particular property. And so you want to make sure that you would get houses that could give you enough cash flow to meet your expenses, right? With some more beside. And so there are formulas for that as well. But you want to make sure that if you are really and truly looking to become really free with real estate, that it is going to require that you scale. But you need to scale smart. So I mentioned earlier about the BRRRR strategy. You want to make sure that you start small, right? You don't want to go in and just buy a whole apartment building if you have no experience, have no clue about it. You want to make sure that you gradually, move into scaling and collecting more doors. So that is something that you want to make sure that you do. So you don't have to have 10 properties, right, to be successful. You can have one that can be successful if it works properly, right? If it gives you a good ROI, or it gives you a good cash flow, then absolutely it can certainly be successful, right? But if you want to scale it, then you want to start small. And as you learn, you grow and add on more doors.
Now, a tool that you can use when you are trying to find a property, if you're looking for rental properties, or to find those that will be specific to being able to utilize them for Airbnb, you can use Zillow. And so I'm going to show you how to quickly go in and do a search. And so if you go here in your search bar, your search engine, you would put in www.zillow.com. And then you would go to buy or rent at the top in the menu bar here, and then you would choose if you're looking to buy. Then you would, if you're looking for properties to purchase, right? If you want to purchase them and then host them on Airbnb, you can do so by going to the buy tab. And then if you want to just rent, to get a property that you could potentially sublet or to rent, you can also do that here with rent. But one thing here is that you want to make sure that you check the lease terms. You want to make sure that it is something that you can do, right? You want to make sure that it is legitimate and that it is allowable, that it is in compliance. And so you would go to the rent area here, and then you would type your desired location. So whether or not you would want to rent an apartment, a house, you want to see all rental listings, you can do that. And then you want to put in your location, right? So say, I don't know, Orlando, Florida. If you want to do more than 2 bedrooms, Orlando homes. This, and let's see what we have that comes up for rental. And so it shows you here what the rentals would be like. And so now the rents that you see here would be more so based on the monthly rate, right? So you would do your pricing based on making sure that you include any property management for this property, all the cleaning services, all of the restocking of supplies and materials for the location. You would incorporate all of that in addition, right, to the monthly rent. And you also want to include, you want to make sure that you also get some cash flow. You don't want to break even. You want to make sure that you charge enough so that you also are able to get some cash flow from this particular property. And so you can see here all of them, and it shows you these just kind of go from 2 bedrooms. But you can certainly go here. You can increase if you want to have a larger space. You can go up to 4 bedrooms, bathrooms, any, and just apply it. Just use the filters there to get what you would like to see. And so again, that's the monthly rate. But then you see that 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, and then you want to go in and research each of these properties. And so that is something that you would want to do. You want to go in, you want to search them out. And then you want to also analyze those listings. It does also allow you to manage rentals, to advertise on here as well. But you'll see that it has here. So you would have to, of course, if you see a property that you like, you would have to reach out to the landlord or to the owner and just discuss, let them know what you are wanting to do, right? It would be great if you have a business entity that's set up that you can go in as that and take over and rent the space, right? But also making sure that the landlord or the owner is aware that it will be used for short-term rental, right? That it will be used for those purposes. And then something else you want to do is you want to make sure that if there's a homeowners association, you want to make sure that the homeowners association, the HOA, allows for short-term rentals. So you want to make sure of that. You want to also review the amenities and the nearby attractions. But you would contact the owner if that information is available. If not, it would be the realtor, and you would request a tour of the area. You can do that you can request a tour, or you can also contact the agent, right? And then any questions that you may have, you want to make sure you do ask what the zoning allows in those areas, right? So you want to see also if the HOA, if there is one, if they allow for short-term rentals, and then also if there are any restrictions towards Airbnb hosting. You want to make sure that those are things, or those are questions that you ask. But you can find the properties here on Zillow, which is another tool that could be very, very helpful. If you already have a property or a space in your current residence that you would like to register on Airbnb, this is how you would do so. So these are the steps very quickly. You would go to www.airbnb.com, and it will take you to your site, to their site. And so what you will need to do is that you will need to set up an account. It already goes into mine automatically. And so what you would need to do is you would put in your information to create an account. You could register with Google, Facebook, Apple, or with an email address. And so once you do that, of course, you create your password and you fill out your profile details. And then it will send you a verification code. And once you retrieve that from your email or from a phone number that you provide, then it will be verified and you will have your account set up. And so once you are set up, you'll see what I have here. And if you go to the top right, it says become a host. So you would press on that, then it would ask you what you would like to host. And in this case, we're talking about a home. So we press home and next. And then here it gives you all of the steps of what to do. And so you would just of course you would go to get started, but it will tell you here, right? So the first thing that you would do is you would tell them about your space that you are registering, and then you will make it stand out, and then you will finish up and publish, which are the final steps. And so it will not allow me to go all the way through, which is why I wanted to mention it there. But you can match with a super host. You can start on your own. So if you want to have someone assist you, you can do this the super host way, or you can do like I just did and set it up on your own. And so the first part is to tell about your space. And so here you want to just describe whether or not it's a home, an apartment, a house or an apartment, if it's a bed and breakfast, if it's a cabin, whatever it is, you would press that. Just for reference of this video, I'm just going to say house, and then it will take you to next. And then here you would say whether or not you want to have registered your entire place or a room, or if you want to have a shared room, right, in a hostel. So you have these options. So I'm going to say entire place and next. And then you want to give the exact address of the place, right? So you want whatever the address is, you want to put that in, the exact location. And then other information, I don't believe it will allow me to move forward without putting in an address. And it does have to be an accurate one before it will allow us to move on. But I'll stop here and just give you the steps. So once you do plug in the address, it will verify it's the location, and then you would be able to press next. And then from next, you'd be prompted to talk about the number of guests that you would be able to house in that location, the bedrooms, the amount of bedrooms, the amount of bathrooms, and any other amenities, right? So if you offer, say, Wi-Fi, or if you have central air or air conditioning, or the kitchen, the workspace, if you have a den, if there's parking facility, if there's a pool, if there's a gym on premises, all of those sorts of things you would include in your amenities. And then for the next part that talks about what makes it stand out, then for that part, let me see if it allows me to go back. So for the next part, to make it stand out, it will require that you upload photos, right? And so they require that you do a minimum of 5, but you can do up to 10 photos, and you want to have a title and a description. So you want to make sure that you capture different angles of the common areas, or the areas that people are most interested in, which would be like the bedrooms, the living areas, the kitchen, the bathroom. If there's an outdoor space, you want to make sure you get that. The outside of the property, if there's a pool, if there's a porch, if there's a deck, those sorts of things you want to make sure you get pictures of. And then you also want to write a compelling description. You want to have a catchy title for it, and you want to have a description that really highlights your property's best features, right? And then you also include any nearby attractions that there may be. And then you can also include there any rules that you may have for the home. Maybe you don't want any smoking on premises or any parties, or maybe no pets. So all of those things you would put in. You would also include like whatever your check-in or check-out times would be, and then you would want to set your pricing, right? So you can let Airbnb suggest pricing based on the market rates, or you can set your own. So you want to also include in there, consider any cleaning fees, any restocking fees, any of those sorts of things. You can do security deposits. So all of those you want to factor into your pricing. So keep that in mind. And then also you can choose your booking settings, right? So you can do an instant book, which would mean that the person is able to book without your approval, right? It would just be an automatic booking. Or you can do with approval required, right? Which would mean when someone goes to book the property, they need your approval first before actually confirming their stay. And then that last piece is that you want to finish up and publish your site. And so it does allow you have to complete each step before it allows you to go on to the others, which is why I stopped here. But those are the steps if you wanted to list your space.
And so there's a quote by Zig Ziglar that says, "You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great." And so you don't have to have everything perfect. You don't have to be great to start it. But you do need to start to be great. And so we want you today to, I shared some information, and I want you to really see how real estate could really, really benefit you, how it could really lead you to financial independence. And as we talked about, 90% of millionaires, of those that are wealthy, are made so through real estate. And so it is a wonderful vehicle. And there's so many different aspects by which you can come in that can be beneficial to you. And so those you need to just figure out, choose whatever your method and your strategy is going to be, learn about it. But I want to challenge you to at least get started. Here we talk about not just listening, right? But also being doers. And so I want to challenge you today to really take what you've heard and start to think about what you would like to do. So, what is one takeaway of what you heard today? Would you, whether you want to buy a rental property, or you want to host guests in a spare room, right? There's so much you can do. Or if you want to get a REIT, or if you just want to maybe just do the fix and flip, right? Still want to purchase a property, but you want to flip it and get the cash out from it, right? And that could also be extremely lucrative. Real estate in general is. And so it doesn't matter what you want to do. Real estate can be a pathway to financial freedom and independence and generational wealth. And we talked about the scripture where it says a man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. Real estate is a vehicle that will allow you to do so. And so I want to challenge you as you leave, or after we conclude our time together today. I want you to start thinking about what you would be interested in doing. And you may not even know off the top of your head. Maybe you could start off by doing your research, right? Start to research the markets, start to look more into the different strategies or the different aspects that you could come in under, and then think about what it is that you would like to do in relation to real estate. Maybe you're not in a position right now where you want to take on purchasing a property or renting a property, right? But you could come in with a REIT, right? But that's a way to even start. Or you can do wholesaling, right? I can't do that because I'm a licensed real estate agent, but uh, for those that are not licensed, I mean, you don't have to be licensed to be in real estate, right? I have my reasons why I did it. It is an advantage. It can be, but you don't have to have it, right? And so you can also engage in the wholesaling part of it, right? There's so many things that you can do with real estate, and even with the Airbnb, right? It can be a room in your house where you, or your in your apartment where you live, right? Even something my husband and I are in the process of doing is Airbnb in our timeshare properties, right? So that is something that you can also do, right? So there's so many things that you can do within real estate that can prove to be lucrative. So you want to start researching the markets, looking at the different strategies to figure out what it is that you want to do. And then you also want to set up, if you are looking to purchase or even to buy and flip anything that's going to require that you purchase, you want to make sure you have a savings plan, because you are going to be required to save up your deposit, right? And so whether or not you would qualify for one of those first time home buyer programs or an FHA loan, then it would be a lower down, lower deposit, but there still will be a deposit, right? And then also with any aspect, that if you're going into the property, you will have to have a savings, right? Because you, especially if you are, even if you rent from someone, you need to have, of course, that they give you the 1 month's deposit, right, in addition to the first month's rent. So you would have to have that, and if there are any other costs that are associated with it, you have to think about furnishings, unless you go into a property that is already furnished. But then, even with that, you want to make sure it is to your standard, right, and to your liking. You want to make sure that it is everything is safe and in good repair, that it has good quality, right? So there's so many things that you have to factor in, but you will need money, right? So you will need to have some money. So you want to start thinking about a savings plan, something that you allocate specifically to that. And as I mentioned with the REIT, you can get into the REITs in under $100. It really depends on which ones that you're interested in. So that may be an entryway, right? That may be something you want to do and build that, and then take that, have that be your savings, and then go into a property. There's so much that you can do, and then also you can join a local real estate meetup, right? Where there are others in the room that are also interested in real estate. You often get people there that are bankers as well, so you can get pre-approvals, get connected, find out what you're eligible for, right? All of those are things that you would have to do. We didn't go into that depth today, but there's so much that you will need to know, right? But there is so much that is available to you by way of real estate, and trust me, it is worth it. And so my challenge to you is to do some homework. I want you to look further, think about which strategy that you would be interested in, if you would be interested in stepping into real estate in some capacity. And so you want to think about that. And I want to encourage you and challenge you to take the first step. Don't wait to be perfect. As I mentioned, you just need to start somewhere. And so start with your research, and then think about what it is that you want to do, and then put a real practical action plan in place, right? Something that gives you steps towards what you are looking to accomplish. And so that is my challenge for you this week, or after we finish our discussion. I want you to start that homework, start thinking about that. Look at other, as I mentioned about Bigger Pockets, that's one that you could look at. And that talks about real estate, right? So those are, you can go there, and they just have, you can just, I don't want to say binge watch, right? But you don't want to get overwhelmed, overstimulated either. But there's so much information out there, and so you want to make sure that it is someone reputable, right? And that there are, that the information that you're getting is sound information, right? So there are a lot of them out there that you can look at. And so, but I want to challenge you to do something with the information that you heard. Go and do some homework. Think about how you would like to enter into the real estate game. It is absolutely lucrative, and it will lead you to financial independence, and not just independence in your life and your generation, but in the lives and the generations to come, right? Your children's children will be able to reap the benefits of the inheritance that you leave from them, that you gain from real estate. And so I am so grateful for the time that you spent today with me. And so I hope that you heard something that at least piqued your interest so that you will look deeper and that you will take an action step. I want you to move into things that you've heard today. And so as we often do, and we affirm, I want us to affirm together, because I want you to be encouraged and know that you can do it. I don't want you to think that it is so far out of your reach. Yes, it does require money, and you may not be in a space right now where you say that you can afford to do some aspects of this, right? But you can do something. So I want you to think about wherever it is that you could come in at. You want to start, right? You can start small and then scale your way up. And even if you're not in the place to be able to do it, say this week or next week, you want to position yourself appropriately that you're able to, work on your your credit score. You want to work on your savings, right? Or maybe and do some investments and some other things so that you can begin to save if this is something that you want to do. So even if it's not buying your first door tomorrow, at least it is planning, putting a plan in place with feasible, right? Obtainable action steps, things that you can achieve, right? So you want to do that. But I want to encourage you so that you know that you can do it. There are so many out there that are doing it already, right? And God is no respecter of persons. And so what others are able to do, you can also do. It's just that they may have more information than you do, right? And so that's why we're here, because we're sharing the information with you and letting you know that this is an option for you, especially if you are after financial independence. And that's what we're talking about here in the month of July. We want you to be financially whole. We want you to be financially independent. And so this is something that is doable. This is something that you absolutely can do. And so even if you want to get in now, you want to make sure that, of course, you do your research, but you don't have to also use your own money, right? If you have good credit, you can get a loan. There are also hard money lenders out there, right? I wouldn't recommend it, but there may be some programs that can benefit you, right? That aren't because when you say hard money lenders, you think like loan sharks, right? And so not to that extent, but you do have some very legitimate companies out there that are helping people. And so the APRs may be a little bit, more expensive because of, you may not, your credit score may not be where it needs to be. You may not have the savings, so there are definitely benefits of that type of a lender. And so, but that's also an option to you, right? Using that OPM, using other people's money. But if this is something that you want to do, I want you to know that you can do it. And knowing that it is not you that is working alone, but that God is working with you. And then there's so many other benefits that I did not even get into of having your own real estate or having your own property. You have the appreciation, you have the tax benefits, and oh my goodness, it just goes on and on and on. But for what we talked about tonight, I want you to start doing some research, and I want you to know that you can do it. And so position yourself appropriately, get your plan, get your action steps, because you can do it and you can reach financial independence through real estate, real for real freedom. And so let us end today by affirming together. So please repeat after me. I decree that I am wise, that I am a wise steward of what God has placed in my hands. And I declare that I sow today in faith and reap generational blessings. Wonderful. And my prayer for you today is, and I will say a quick prayer: God, give us wisdom, vision, and courage to be good stewards of what you have placed in our hands. Let the seeds we sow in faith multiply in blessings for generations to come. Amen. And so I have enjoyed our time here together today. Please do like and share, and please leave a comment. I'd love to hear feedback from you. Also, I will leave down in the description box, I will leave information. I do have a little guide to real estate investing that I will put down in the description box. The link below for that. So if you're interested in learning more, getting just a few more tips, please do go there. Go to the link and get your free copy. It is free to you. It is a real estate investing starters guide, and so that is available to you. So please go down and get and hit the link and do that, and also remember to like and subscribe. I enjoyed our time together, and so as always, take care of yourself, mind, body, and soul. Be blessed and be made whole.
We thank you for sharing this time with us here at Wholeness Wednesdays. Thank you for joining us to explore and experience this journey to complete wholeness. Please remember that we are only an email away. Your questions and input are welcome via bhutch@completelywhole1.com. See you next time here at Wholeness Wednesdays.